Hello students, welcome to 1950s China and today's China, how it's changed and why. We're going to have a look at a few reasons how it has changed and why. Alright, let's look at today's China. Let's just start off. Modern China today, guys, is a mix of old China and new China. Okay, Western countries like the United States, Australia and the UK and parts of Europe have greatly influenced Eastern countries like China. Okay, and just to keep it simple, when I say Western countries, I just mean countries are like you're used to, places like England and America and Australia and parts of Europe. Okay, very different to the culture in China, and we'll talk more about that. But of course, all of these countries have had many relationships with China over the past 50 years or so, even more so, and so China's beginning to change from what it was into something a little bit different. Now guys, just to get an idea of what was happening in 1950 in China, we need to meet this man. This man is a lovely man called Mao Zedong. And I jest a bit when I say he was lovely because I don't think it was terribly lovely. More or less, he took charge of China with his army in the 1950s, early 1950s, and he introduced a type of government called a communist government, and we call it communism. Guys, just to keep it really simple, let's talk about communism. Here's the points. 1, the government owns everything in communism. You don't own your house or your dog, the government owns it. 2, everyone works for the government. They pay you a set amount of money. That's all you get. Sometimes you don't even get money, you just get tickets for food. 3, the government decides what you get. Just a point there, like number 2. Number 4, even if you work really hard, you still can't buy a nicer house or better shoes or nicer shirt. You just get what you're given. You should work hard just to be a good citizen and not for a nice house on the beach. That's the way that communism works. Number 5, you don't get to vote for a new government. Doesn't matter whether you like Tony Abbott or Julia Gillard. You still are stuck with Mao Zedong or whoever he wants to be in charge. Can I suggest, Year 5, that communism is not a great deal of fun? Can I also note that this is a bit of an oversimplification of what communism is, but it's basically the way it was in the 1950s in China, and it's basically what communism is. It's very different to our society, isn't it? In our society, you work hard, you can get more money, and you buy nice stuff. But communism is not like that. We get to vote for a new leader every 3 years. Communism is not like that. Okay, 1950s China. Cities quite small, not terribly impressive. Many more of these style of old village homes, even right next to the cities. But of course now, very different. Cities are big, glitzy, much more like cities in America or Australia. Why is this? Well, China's become increasingly prosperous. It's made money. It's been able to buy and build better cities. And of course, it likes cities like this because it's seen them in other countries in the world. And it thinks, you know what? We would like cities like that too. So again, Western countries affecting China. Okay, here we go. We have some clothes that people wore in the 1950s. Very simple clothes. They're styled after members of the Communist Party, actually very boring, very simple, very strict. But of course, 2013, much more just like America and Australia and the UK and parts of Europe. Yeah, they've been watching movies. The Chinese people watch movies, they meet Western people like us, and they think, those clothes look great, we want to dress like that. And so, of course, they've got the money to afford it now as well, so they change the style of clothes they wear. And the clothes that Chinese people wear today generally are much more modern and contemporary than clothes they used to wear. Okay, in the past, maybe in the 1950s, so this photo doesn't quite make sense because it's got motorbikes in it, so this isn't a great photo. But a lot more smaller basic shops like this in 1950s China. And can I say they're still there? They're still there, but now in 2013 you've got many more giant shopping malls just like this one, just like Miranda Fair. And that's of course, again, because China's got more money. It can afford to build these malls, and the people want them as well. The people have seen all the wonderful, lovely things that the Americans and the British and the Europeans and the Australians get in and buy in. They see the hamburgers on the news and on the television. They want them as well. So that's why they get a McDonald's built as well down the road from them. Okay, they can afford it and they want it. So the Chinese see what's going on in America and they want to copy them a little bit, a little bit. Here you go, guys. 1950s China bikes. Everybody rode bikes. Almost everybody. I think even Mao Zedong probably rode a bike. There were so many bikes in China. There weren't any cars really at all. These days, you've still got plenty of bikes, but many more cars driving alongside bikes in China. And motorbikes. Once again, because people can afford them. And because they've seen it in other civilizations like America, Australia, Europe, and they think, well, they've got cars, we should have cars as well. Let's talk about family. Here we go. 1950s China. You have got four generations in one home often. Look at this. You've got the great-grandparents. You've got the grandparents, you've got just the normal parents, and then you've got the children. 4 generations in one home. They all used to squish into the same house. Now, guys, you still have that in China, but much less. Now, often you'll just have mum and dad, grandpa and grandma, and the kids. Okay, which is still very different to Australia. Okay, I mean, I know that most of you do not live with your grandparents, but most Chinese families do. But even some Chinese families just have mum, dad, and the little boy or the little girl. Okay, so what we can say there is less of families all living together. And that's changed because, again, China's got more money. They can afford to live in their own houses and things like that. And of course, well, they are slightly more inclined to because they've seen Western societies do it and they think, well, perhaps I don't want to live with my grandparents for the rest of my life. Perhaps I can afford to support them in a home and pay for them from a distance. So it's becoming less customary for families to live together in China than it used to be. Guys, let's look at sports. 1950 sports used to be very basic. Used to have things like yak racing, martial arts, but these days China's joined in with the rest of the planet. They're playing soccer, they're playing basketball, you name it. China plays it as a sport and often does very well, actually. So they're playing all the Western sports as well. Okay, they're playing all the sports that America and America and Australia and Britain plays. The Chinese are playing now as well, and they're doing very well, though we're still beating them in surfing. Now, here's the most serious one, I think. The communist government in China, which is still there, and I've got to say, honestly, I'm really glad I don't live in China, but the communist government is becoming slightly less restrictive, a little bit more democratic. Can I say a real little bit? Not super amounts, but a real little bit, okay? For example, right, some disagreement with the government is okay. Some. You're still not allowed to form groups and work against the government. If you form groups and work against the government, you go to jail. Okay, some of the things you get in China can be your own. People can start to own some of their own homes and can spend their money on things they like. Still, most of the property in China is owned by the Chinese government, but there is much more of you personally owning your own things than there used to be. Alright, inside the Chinese Communist Party, like the Labour Party or the Liberal, they have a little bit of voting. So they'll vote for their own leaders inside the party. It didn't used to be like that. It used to be who had the most guns and controlled the most soldiers. But inside the party can elect its own leaders. Now, hear what I'm saying here. You can't vote. You're not allowed to vote. But the party itself can vote for itself. So it's a bit like Tony Abbott. Tony Abbott and all his Liberal mates can vote for who's going to be the leader of the Liberal Party, but the Liberal Party's still in charge. You can't vote them out, not in China. The Communist Party is always going to be in charge, but inside the Communist Party, they can vote for themselves and decide who they want to be the leader. Right, can I say, just before you think, oh, maybe China is okay and I should go and live there, I hope you don't like YouTube because that's blocked, gone. I hope you don't plan on using Facebook because that's blocked. Gone. There's about 8 other very popular internet sites that are blocked simply because they will say and do things that are against the Chinese government. So remember, you can disagree with the government only a little bit. Only a little bit. And if you disagree too much, sometimes you'll be put in jail or sometimes people just disappear, which is pretty grim. Remember, in Australia, you can disagree as much as you want. You can say whatever you like about Tony Abbott or Julia Gillard or Kevin Rudd, and that's your right. You'll never be put in jail for it. But in China, you have to be very careful what you say against the government. But it is getting a little bit better. I've underlined bit. A little bit better. Alright guys, there's the quick guide to the difference between 1950s China and today. I hope it helps. Thanks for listening.